Thank you. Thank you very much, Lynn. This is a very special night. You heard I won the TED Prize. And every year, TED conferences, you may have seen some of their talks online, they give awards to people whom they think have made a bit of a difference, but who, with their help, could make more of an impact. And I knew exactly what it was I wanted, because I write about religion. I write about all world religion. And I know that every single one of these puts compassion and what's often called the golden rule: never treat others as you would not like to be treated yourself. They've put that right at the center of their vision and said it's the test of true religion. And yet you never hear about it. You don't hear about it enough. And so what the world really needs now is compassion. Everywhere you look on the world, every time you switch on the news, there's often bad news. There's wars, there's hunger, there's anger, there are riots, there's distress out there. And I am convinced now that unless we learn to put the golden rule into practice globally, all through the world, in international politics, the world is not going to be a safe place. If we want a peaceful world, we've got to be compassionate. We've got to make sure that everybody, all peoples, all nations, whatever their ideas, whatever their race, is treated as we would wish to be treated ourselves. And if we had done that in the past, there wouldn't be so many problems today. Now, of course, I'm sure you know, compassion doesn't mean feeling sorry for people. It doesn't mean pity. It means feeling with somebody else. That's what the golden rule says. You look into your own heart, find out what gives you pain, and then refuse under any circumstance whatsoever to inflict that pain on anybody else. And the world religions say, too, you can't confine your compassion to your own group. Just be compassionate to the people you like. You have to have concern for everybody. Love your enemies, said Jesus. Reach out to all tribes and nations, says the Quran. And so I asked Ted to help me to write and create and propagate a charter for compassion, which was written by leading activists and thinkers in 6 of the major world religions. And it was a sign that even though the religions have many, many differences, and they often seem to be quarreling with one another, on this we were all in agreement, and we could join hands together and work for a better world. So then we launched the charter, as you've heard, and then we had to put it into practice. How? Because the charter is a call to action. It's calling, for example, that youth, like yourselves, are given clear and accurate information about other peoples and other cultures. Very important, because you are the future. And if when my generation had been younger, we'd had that kind of information, perhaps the world wouldn't be in this mess now. Youth has a very important part to play, and that's why I'm so happy to be here tonight. I feel very bad in some ways standing in front of you, because I think we're leaving you, my generation, a very difficult world. So I've been talking all week to older people, because we've got to get active. We people who've helped to make this mess, we've got to start turning things around by making compassion a real practical force in the world. But you haven't got all these stuck in ideas. You're not stuck in the same old mindset as we are. You're fresh. You can take a good hard look at things and say, no, right from the start, we're going to do something differently. We're going to really work for a better world. And you'll be joining a whole community now that's grown up in the last 2 years around the Charter. You know, one of the leading countries who are working for the Charter is Pakistan. Now, Pakistan is right on the front line of many of the problems in our world. They have violence there every day. They've got a war on their backyard in Afghanistan. It's a really very difficult and dangerous place. And yet the enthusiasm there for the Charter, precisely because people know that things are urgent, has been enormous. I went there in 2011 to launch the Charter there, and 1,000 people were coming 3 times a day to talk about compassion and listen to what I had to say. And one of the things that they're concentrating on in Pakistan is education. And they are establishing a network of compassionate schools. Now, this is also happening in Canada, and you may want to go away and go back to your school and say, let's make our school one of these compassionate schools. And you can find out on the website, www.charterforcompassion.org, or from the Dalai Lama Center, or from the Greater Vancouver Compassion Network, rather difficult to say, Greater Vancouver Compassion Network, how to go about that. That's a practical step that you can take. And in Jordan, too, they are also working along these lines. And what we're all hoping to do is that the schools that are belonging to these networks can say hello to one another electronically in lessons, so that you could perhaps, in your class on compassion, have a conversation with people in Pakistan or Jordan. And slowly, the divisions and misunderstandings that we have in our world can get whittled away, and we'll start to learn to look at one another with greater respect and understanding. Now, so schools is one thing. Another thing they did in Ramadan, that's the sacred month of fasting, a holy month of prayer for Muslims. They put up a competition on the web where people of all persuasions, young and old, were invited to post up a compassionate action every day in Ramadan. And now you can do that, something like that, too. You could think of, the idea is to sort of move compassion from the back of our minds, where it often is, right to the forefront. So it's one of the things we think about. You can make a huge difference to somebody's life by one compassionate action. If I have time during the day, perhaps at the end, I'll tell you about a compassionate action that someone did to me when I was a young person that really turned my life around. Just a little thing. I'm sure she forgot about it half an hour later, but I've never forgotten. And you can do that for somebody every day, making a difference in someone's life. Now, you heard about my book, 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life. One of the things you might like to do is start a book club of your own to discuss that book and see how you can put the practices in that book step by step into your life gradually, so compassion becomes part of your life. Now, there are 12 steps in this, but I can't talk about all those tonight. But there are just 3 I'd like to mention. The third step is have compassion for yourself. Now, that may sound odd, but unless we are able to accept ourselves as we are, it'll be very difficult for us to be compassionate to other people. And I remember, many of you may be having a wonderful time as young people. I remember youth as being a really quite difficult time. And what you've got to realize is that you're not alone. I remember being so distressed by all my nasty little faults and failings that I didn't want anybody to know about. It wasn't anything grandiose or dramatic, just little meannesses, little fantasies, fears that I had, real fears, embarrassing fears that I didn't want anyone to know about. I'm telling you, everybody has these. And I was brought up in a very religious background where we were all told, we were being given stories about the saints all the time, these impossibly good people who didn't seem to have any of these problems. I'm telling you, the saint is fiction. There's no such thing as a saint. Every single person, every single one of us has faults. These little faults, we just have to accept them. That's what we are. We try to keep them under wraps as best we can, but don't think you're alone in that. Don't think, oh, well, compassion is for sort of saintly people, good people. I'm not really up to that. Yes, you are. Even some of the great examples of compassion in our time, like Martin Luther King or Gandhi, they had faults, but look what they achieved. It just takes one person to make a massive difference in the world. And if all of you could get out there and become compassionate people or working for compassion, look, you could change the world. You could turn things around. We really have to believe that. And I think it can be done. If you look at people like Martin Luther King, look at people like Gandhi, you see what one person can do. Another thing we all have is pain. We all have griefs and fears and distress and not necessarily about huge things, but about tiny little things sometimes that we're embarrassed to mention. Everybody has it. And pain is the one thing that unites all human beings. We all have pain. So don't try and push that pain away and say, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this, or everybody has it. Pain is something that can link us together. And you can start looking out, as you start thinking about compassion, for the way you can see other people in pain sometimes. Sometimes when people are angry or enraged about something, they're probably in pain. And that sort of starts changing your outlook. Don't be afraid of your pain. Take it, own it, live with it, and be positive and deal with it as creatively as you can. But remember that everybody else has pain too. This is a suffering world. Everybody suffers, even the most fortunate of us. And that is something we have in common. And it's something that we can do something about practically in our own lives and in other people. And you can find that the more compassionately you start acting, when thinking of other people, trying not to make their lives any worse, day by day, all day and every day, Confucius said, not just when you feel like it, you'll start feeling better in yourself too. Another step, step 7, is how little we know. Now, we've got a lot of information at our disposal today. We can go online and at the click of a mouse, we can get a whole lot of facts and figures and information. But remember, there's a whole lot we don't know. You're probably very conscious of the fact that you don't know a lot of stuff. Keep hold of that idea and don't lose it when you grow up. Because a lot of grown-ups, a lot of adults who are sort of holding forth about this and that don't know much either. Don't believe all you read in the newspapers or what you hear on the news. Have a curious attitude. Because the beginning of wisdom, the beginning of being wise, is to realize how little you know. One of the wisest men in the world was Socrates, who founded the Western rational tradition. And on his death day, the day he died, he said, I'm only wise for one reason, that I know nothing at all. Now, you see, very often, if you listen out for this, get sensitive to it, you hear people holding forth about other people. Oh, well, the trouble with her is. Or, she's always doing such and such, as though you could sum up in a single sentence the extraordinary mystery and complicated structure of each human being. I don't know about you, I still am trying to understand myself. We are a mass of contradictions. How could you sum up yourself and say, I'm always like this? So don't say it about other people. And then people say it about whole cultures, whole peoples, whole races. Oh, well, the trouble with Islam is. And again, if you happen to know something, a little bit about the subject under discussion, you realize that the amount of reliable information they have could be comfortably written on the back of a small postcard. Now, this is dangerous. We have to realize that a lot of these people whom we see on the news in fighting, and they are in pain. A lot of them are living in countries where it's not been peaceful as it is in Canada, but is war and violence. And so we have to again think, here they are in pain. What would it be like? What would I be doing if I were living in that situation? Put yourself in other people's shoes. Keep asking questions, and don't think that there are any easy answers. Keep an open mind. At the moment, you're learning stuff all the time, and you're constantly aware of how little you know. Keep that. If you keep that feeling alive and well, it's the beginning of compassion. It's the beginning of wisdom. And finally, how do we speak to one another? Because if you start listening to the way people speak to one another in political debates, listen to the news. Listen to debates on television, panel debates. Listen to discussions that people have in school. And notice how aggressive it often is. It's one of our characteristics in our Western culture is that it isn't enough for us in our discussions to seek the truth in politics or in the scholarly world or on the media, on television. We also have to defeat and make our opponents look stupid. And this is very aggressive. And we're so busy holding forth and showing how brilliant we are that we are blocking our access to truth. What we've got to do now and keep an open mind about is, because we have so many of the things we thought we knew we'd got settled and tied up have proved to have feet of clay. We thought our financial institutions were safe. And 2008, we've had an economic meltdown. We thought we'd got a fairly sound international foreign policy. Look at the mess of the world. So now we need to get rid of all those old ideas. Keep an open mind for something fresh to come in. And let us speak to one another. This is something you can learn to do right from tonight to day one, because you're all going to be having very compassionate conversations. Listen to one another. And if you don't agree, say, I don't agree, but say it in a way that is open and keeps the conversation going. And let other people change your mind. This is something we desperately need to do this in our society at large. Listen out loud, listen carefully for uncompassionate speech on the television, on the news, or people saying dreadful things about other parts of the world, and say, this isn't right. We can't afford this anymore. We're all in this together. And we can turn this around. You know, I grew up in the 1950s, And in those days, people spoke about people of other races in a really ugly way. They didn't think about it. It was just a general thing to do. They also spoke about gender issues, about, often stupid things about women, they would say, about how we weren't intelligent, or, or don't bother your pretty little head about serious matters, that kind of thing. Now, in the 1960s, the civil rights movement and the feminists absolutely changed the way we speak about race and gender. So it can be done. We can change the way people speak and think and talk about one another. And all this helps to build up a sensitivity to the pain of the world and the ability to do something about it. Now, you're going to have a wonderful evening, I think, but remember, it's just the beginning. What you want to come away with today is a plan, something that you personally resolve you can do. We all have to look round at our particular world, in our particular family, in our particular school, in our particular community, and say, how can I make something better here? And then you will become a light to the world, and who knows what you can do in the future. Thank you.